story because, first of all, Africa gets almost no attention. And they're also the countries of Africa also are the ones that get hardest hit when the United States and NATO decides to have its dalliances around the world. They are the ones that suffered the most, right? But we don't hear much about it. A few months ago, the United States and the European Union put intense pressure on the African countries to fall in line and vote for giving unlimited power to the World Health Organization. You may or may not remember this story. Africa said F you and voted against giving unelected group of globalists power over their lives. Here was the scene, right? Look at this. This was the scene when they were voting on this. And basically African countries stood up and said, no, thank you. There was applause. There was it got suppressed on social media, but there were a couple of tweets that you could actually see people applauding. So Africa stood up for the whole world and they said, no. We are not going to give a group of unelected World Health Organization globalists power to run our lives.
So did Brazil, to be fair.
True. Yes, Brazil did as well. And what this would have done would have been awful, right? So the United States and all of these European countries would have handed over power to the World Health Organization so that in the event of another pandemic, which would never happen, right? Then they would consolidate power under one currency. They would tell us all what to do, mandating lockdowns, all sorts of things, right? They would have unified power to dictate, and all of the countries then would listen.
And track you.
And track
your movement and mandate vaccines.
So let's give it up for Africa for stopping this, at least temporarily, and they told the World Health Organization to go screw themselves.
Well, now the U.S. doesn't like all this sovereignty and making its own decisions that Africa is up to. So the United States now has decided to put some pressure on Africa to basically sanction itself against buying any goods or anything else from Russia other than grain and fertilizer. Grain and fertilizer, okay, fine.
Here's the New York Times headline.
Yes. So now the New York Times is reporting that U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, is warning African countries not to purchase anything from Russia besides grain and fertilizer, or else what? Or else what? You know what? Sanctions.
Because we love our sanctions.
Our favorite things, right? So you sanction them, or we're going to sanction you, right? Now, you may recall that just a few weeks ago, we reported that African nations they had a conference lately. They published a paper and they said, we need to tap into our own resources of fossil fuel for energy because we are too dependent on foreign imports and therefore too vulnerable to outside influences. This is prime example of that kind of thing, right? So the rest of the world said, no, Africa, you're going the wrong way. Don't use fossil fuels. You'll screw up the environment. Like, it's fine for us to have done that, but you don't start, right? Don't go and use your own oil unless we want it, then give it to us, right? But no, we cannot have African nations making sovereign decisions. We need to reserve the right to tell you what to do.
So here's what U.S. Ambassador Thomas Linda Greenfield said when, and we'll go through what she was planning here with this New York Times, in this New York Times piece. It lays it out pretty well. She says, during a visit to Uganda, that countries could buy Russian agricultural products, including fertilizer and wheat. But she added that if a country decides to engage with Russia where there are sanctions, then they are breaking those sanctions. She says, we caution countries not to break those sanctions because then they stand the chance of having actions taken against them. I mean, the audacity.
That's a not so veiled threat.
Like, you bullies, right?